Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast. That is, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with our Potomac Watch podcast here with Monet Ukwe-Barua and Kyle Peterson. And let's look at some of the polling, taking a snapshot of where the presidential race stands right now. Two new polls this week show Joe Biden trailing Donald Trump. New York Times Siena poll shows that he is trailing in 5 of 6 battleground states, the swing states of the 7 or so swing states that are expected to be most closely contested and probably will determine the results. Pennsylvania, Arizona, Michigan, Georgia, Nevada, Donald Trump leading. And comfortably so in some of them, 47-44 in Pennsylvania, Arizona 49-42 for Trump, Michigan 49-42, Georgia 49-39, and Nevada, which Joe Biden carried in 2020, 50-38 for Donald Trump. Only in Wisconsin, where Biden leads 47-45, is he leading. Then you have the Fox News poll. Better news for President Biden. He's losing only by a single point, which is in the margin of error, 49-48 in that poll. That shows him gaining ground from March of 50, where it was 50-45 for Donald Trump. Let's listen to White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre explain why she thinks the president is behind.
We understand that even, you think about gas prices, and because of Putin's war, what that has occurred, that led to gas prices increasing. And the president had a lot to deal with when he walked in. A lot of crises. And this is a president that took that very, very seriously and took action. I can't speak to the polls, right? Those are for folks who are experts who can do a deep dive and look into that and speak to them. What I can speak to is we understand what the American people is feeling. We understand what they're going through. That's why we're going to continue to do the work.
The president taking on a lot of difficult tasks, Kyle, that's actually what you want to do when you're a president coming in. You want to start out having to fix some things, and he took over amid COVID. The problem he has is that he hasn't, in the eyes of the public, fixed some of these problems, and that's in particular the economy, where he gets low marks, inflation gets low marks, border security, which was not the big problem when he took over, but really now is a big problem. If it were held today, let me ask you this, would Trump win?
I think he probably would. And voters, far from thinking that Biden has not fixed some of those problems, I think many voters feel like he has worsened some of those problems. The inflation that topped out at 9% year over year. And President Biden has been making the argument it has been coming down now, but people are still seeing those prices, feeling it in their paychecks. Not much that he can do about that at this point. The border is an interesting case because there he came into office, President Biden, and immediately reversed many of President Trump's policies. And I think that voters correctly feel that that has contributed to the problem. And so noticeable in recent days, there have been rumors floating around that President Biden is now planning an executive order. So here's a line from a New York Post story on May 15th. He's planning executive action that would allow him to shut down the U.S.-Mexico border once the number of migrants crossing reaches 4,000 per day, citing a source close to the White House. And so that to me seems like it is aimed at the election after he declined to do that in recent months when the border crisis was top of mind, top of news. He is now planning to do that as the summer gets going in the warm months, which are generally a time of lower migration at the southern border anyway. I don't know if he'll be able to reverse that. But then the third thing I think is what we've been talking about, his age, the sense by voters that he's been shielded, that he hasn't been out very much. He hasn't given many interviews. And his attempt there is obviously this early debate in June. There's still a long way to go. I think this is still one of the more unpredictable elections we've had in a long time because you have two major party candidates that are deeply disliked by the public. It is America's great unpopularity contest. Seems like it would be a great year for a third party, but the third party candidate who's running is RFK Jr., who is an anti-vax advocate and has his own baggage and is not the answer that I think many of these people who are dissatisfied with the Republican Democratic choices are looking for.
With all of the things that Kyle and I have described, Monet, nonetheless, if Fox poll is right, it's a 1-point race. It could go either way.
Without a doubt, Trump is still Trump. Let's not forget. He has some of the highest unfavorables of any candidate or president in recent American history, left office with very low approval rating, and is currently under 4 indictments. And so it's not exactly easy for him, despite the dissatisfaction with Joe Biden, to try to build support enough in these states to really go up by a very wide margin. And I think that it's surprising, to be frank, that he is able to lead in some of these swing states by as much as he seems to be. I would expect those numbers to tighten as the race goes on. But I do think Trump also hasn't exactly helped himself in this regard. A lot of his campaign is still aimed directly at ginning up excitement among his base, which is an important thing for any candidate to do. But he has a real opportunity to build some outreach toward a lot of these voters in the Republican Party who supported Nikki Haley, et cetera. And so hopefully he will be able to pivot a little bit.
Yeah, that's a very important point, Monet. I think what you get from Donald Trump is he's stirring up the base and hitting his favorite hits. And they're with him, as that Wildwood, New Jersey rally on Saturday showed, where 80 to 100,000 people showed up. But what you don't get from Donald Trump is any sense about the future. What would a second term for Trump actually be? What would it do? He's talked in general terms about a tax cut. He's talked in general terms about, well, the world will be a safer place. But mostly on foreign policy, what he says is, we wouldn't have had these wars because they didn't start in my term. Well, but what was he going to do other than solve it? The Ukraine war in 24 hours. Does he have a plan? So you don't get a sense, if you're a swing voter, why the next 4 years would be better than these 4 or Donald Trump's first term. So you're left with a sense of, okay, well, the economy was better when Trump was president, when Biden was president. Yeah, the world was calmer. There weren't wars, but you don't get a sense of what he wants next. Kyle, you get the last word.
And I think those swing voters also don't get a sense that President Trump is reaching out to them. Many of them voted Republican in 2020 on congressional races, but then didn't vote at the top of the ticket. The Republican congressman in Wisconsin ran something like 55,000 votes ahead of Trump, which was double the margin by which Trump lost the state of Wisconsin to Joe Biden. And there are many ways that President Trump could go after those voters, restraining himself a little bit more on social media, picking a vice presidential candidate like Nikki Haley or Glenn Youngkin, or someone that is a little bit more moderate and a calmer personality. And maybe he will do that, but it remains to be seen. There are all sorts of other people in the mix too, like J.D. Vance, who I don't think would reach out or speak to those suburban swing voters that the Republicans used to take for granted and who have really abandoned the GOP in the Trump era.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Monet. Thank you all for listening to our daily Potomac Watch podcast. We appreciate you downloading us and listening in, and hope you join us tomorrow and every day on Potomac Watch.